Hi guys, so welcome to another episode of Humans of EdTech. Awesome. So today we are going to look at something called as the item response theory. I mean, it may sound a little intimidating, but it is something that you are using or you are used it in the past, but you don't know you have used it, or maybe you are designing it for your learners. If you're a product manager, if you're an instructional designer, you probably have plans to use this for your learners. So let's have a look at what is this item response theory, why the S curve matters. So typically, I think we always are fascinated by the bell curve, the normal distribution. People on either sides of the bell curve and the bulk of the majority somewhere in the center. So here I think we move from the bell curve to an S curve, and I think why it really matters. So the objective of this particular video is not to go into the mathematical depth of item response theory, or it's, I think, one of the most simplest, gentlest introduction, and we just want to not throw any psychological jargon or anything of that sort, but just to very gently introduce this thing to you. So let's quickly kind of get started with this particular part. Right. So what we're going to look over here is what is this S curve? What is item response theory? Just to understand it at a very high level. What are the applications? Where do we come across some of these things? And why should you, as a product manager, as an instructional designer, as a learning outcomes engineer, even care for this particular thing? So let's quickly jump into it. So I'm sure you must have seen this particular curve many times in the past. So this is something which has wide applications, whether it is in performance appraisal and a lot of phenomena in and around the nature, like height of students, distribution of various other things, is typically the bell shaped curve, where a vast majority is in the center, and the outliers, or so to speak, the people who are at the extreme end or extreme end of the performance value chain, are on the either sides. So this is something I'm sure you must have seen and have a lot of examples of a lot of phenomena which follow this kind of a distribution. Today we are going to look at something what we call as the S curve. So in the S curve, what we are going to look at is there can be a family of these S curves, where we are essentially looking at building out these S curves, where on the left hand side you are able to see three S curves which have similar slopes, but they are placed on different sides. They have similar slopes, but they are placed a little differently and spaced out. Whereas on the right hand side, you may be able to see three curves where the median, so to speak, and let's just call it median, they all intersect, they all pass through a single point, but their slopes are different. They all pass through the same point, but their slopes are different. So if you look at a lot of phenomena in the nature, like if you're doing some sort of ads, and you're doing some sort of a newspaper impressions on top of it, newspaper ads. So if you do like one ad, two ad, nothing is going to happen. But I think if you're going to do ads enough number of times, then I think the awareness is going to build up. But if you do ads like obscene number of times, then I think it is going to get saturated. So I think there is a natural limit. I think initially nothing picks up, then things really pick up in a hurry, and then it kind of saturates. So whether it is outdoor advertising, all those pole banners that you have, or a lot of other phenomena use it. So depending on where you are coming from and what your background is, you may be able to see a step function over here if you're from an engineering background, which is not exactly a clean step function. Or if you're from a very statistical background, you might be able to see some sort of a cumulative density function or anything of that sort. But what this essentially says is that if you look at any of these curves, it essentially divides into, let's just say, left and the right. And then there are some curves, like say over here, the blue curve divides the space in left and right much more strongly. It has a slightly higher discrimination, so to speak, and I think we'll come to some of these things a bit later. But whereas this green line, it's a little bit more lax. It divides the same, in left and right, but it's like the it's not a very hard division, and I'm just trying to be very human with respect to choice of vocabulary and communication. So I just want to say that the blue line or the black line, as you can see over here, it divides vertically in left and right, but the green line doesn't divide vertically very strongly. So that's essentially the thing, and we'll come to this particular thing. At the core, at the heart of the item response theory is understanding the mathematics behind this particular curve. And if you're able to understand this particular part, if you're just able to understand these two particular charts and diagrams, not maybe mathematically but just conceptually, or get the intuition behind it, you will have a very good conversational understanding of what item response theory is. Awesome. So let's quickly get started with what item response theory is. So this is something that I have picked up from Wikipedia, and I just want to, you can read through the definition and everything, and I'm not going to, read it out. But what I really want to point your attention over here is to just a couple of things. If you've taken any of the adaptive tests, if you've taken a CAT for getting into some sort of a MBA school in India, GRE, GMAT, or any other aptitude test, you most likely, you possibly have seen the item response theory at play. You have seen some of that. Anywhere I think you find some sort of standardization of test, uniform scoring, whether you're taking the test from this particular country or the US or any of the African countries or somewhere in Southeast or somewhere in Far East, the GRE essentially stays the same everywhere, a standardized test. So you've possibly seen some sort of item response theory being at play over there. So I think I just put that definition because I think the reason being, there is a lot of I would not say facade, but I think it is made out to be more complicated than what it is. I'm not trivializing it or saying that it is extremely simple, but I think there is a way where you can conceptually and have developed a very strong intuition for item response theory, and as a product designer, as a instructional designer, you may be able to leverage that insight. Great, awesome. Let's quickly move ahead and let's understand what are the applications of IRT. So test standardization, GRE, we already spoke about it. Consumer sentiment, judgment, anywhere where there is some sort of a unlocking of latent, hidden sentiment is required. IRT may be useful. So in questionnaire design, you're going to come across those 5-point scales, 7-point scales, 9-point scales, positive scales, continuum, draggers, and lots of those things. But how do you analyze that data meaningfully? How do you, I think the unlocking the insight from some of those things, that's where the item response theory does come into play. So it has like a lot of layers built into it. And finally, I think the leadership assessment, research, selection process. I think this is somewhere, if you look at speak to some of the executive search firms, they may be using something similar to this for at least shortlisting or some early stages of evaluating some talent. The number one thing that I've put on this particular slide is the programming ability, and that is something that is of obvious interest to me, and something that I've seen at play. So it does not have a 100% proven utility over here. Item response theory being used to assess, evaluate, benchmark programming ability is something that I'm not seen very strongly, frequently, but it is something that can be done. There is some amount of research and some amount of work that is already being done on it in literature globally, and something that we have also seen doing it. So when we come to being able to discriminate a good programmer from a bad programmer, and I'm just trying to make some very broad generalizations, the difficulty comes into play. So I think marrying that difficulty and good programmer and bad programmer, if you were to just take these two things, if you take two different tests, and one test has 10 questions but all easy, and second test has 10 questions all difficult, someone who gets 10 on 10 in the first test where all easy questions are there, and someone who gets 4 on 10 on a questionnaire which has all difficult questions, how do you compare those two candidates? Maybe IRT can give us some direction in that particular case. Ability to discriminate and factoring in the right kind of difficulty. measuring their difficulty, quantifying it, and then throwing out some standardized scores. Maybe that is what IRT really does over here. So these are some of the applications of IRT, and I'm sure that you maybe, if you're thinking from a learner mindset, learning outcome mindset, this is something that is of total interest to you. Great. Quickly moving on. Why should you, as a product manager, as a learning outcome engineer, as an instructional designer, care about it? So I think at the heart of a measurement framework, when you are having students in the system, whether it is your classroom, it is an online classroom environment, cohort, batch, however you define it, or it is a cohort of one kind of a thing, a measurement framework is at the heart of being able to give some sort of a meaningful feedback. So to plan any kind of instruction and the following intervention, you will need to have a very strong, robust measurement framework. So how do you unlock some of these insights? How do you get the best out of the measurement framework, questions, quizzes, assessments that you put in over there, and plan some of these interventions? This is somewhere this will be very useful. A learner is very likely to trust you if the learner finds that this particular software system, online product, tool, test gives me a very valued, genuine kind of a feedback. If the tool comes back and tells you that this is where you messed up, this is where you went wrong, and exactly pinpoints it out for you, I think it's a very valuable insight. When to show that thing, how to show that thing, a lot of UI, UX, experience considerations come into that, but that insight per se is extremely valuable. So this is something, again, can be unlocked out of this particular part. I would like to bring out, and I'll share some of these things, going more into the measurement framework, standardization, measuring skills. So NASSCOM has something called as qualification packs, and we'll have a look at it, and something called as an Edison project. This is a global kind of a thing. So there are a lot of people who do a lot of these things for different fields and different competencies and different areas. So we'll have a look at it. And finally, guys, I think if you're a product manager, revenue is somewhere your consideration. Learning outcomes, yes, but learner outcomes engineer has a twofold kind of objective where you want to achieve the learning outcomes and also want to make sure that the revenue, the learner also pays something tangibly to the organization for the product that he or she is using. We'll just quickly jump into what this NASSCOM qualification pack is and Edison project is. Before that, I just want to put one last caveat over here, that item response theory is not a solution for everything. It is not something that can be applied blindly or has to be put in. It's not like that topping. It's not a that taste maker. It is something that needs to be first understood so that it can be used intelligently. So that's one particular thing. Human evaluation and feedback. There are a lot of these online platforms where people code, they submit their code, or people build projects and they submit their projects, and then a human evaluator at the other end with a certain amount of delay or certain clearly defined SLAs come back to you with a qualitative/quantitative feedback. The instructor in this particular case is using a document called as rubric, which is essentially just a document that is going to help the instructor that please evaluate this assessment on these 12 points. It's a very well documented rubric, and maybe I think one of these videos I'll share what a rubric typically looks like. So that's what may also solve your business problems at many times. You don't necessarily always have to get into item response theory, quantify it, measure it out, report it out. This may solve your problem just enough. One playlist that I want to share with you for all those who are slightly mathematically inclined. I think you should definitely get started with this particular video, which is the conceptual introduction to item response theory. I have gone through all these 6 videos. I understand it's close to 60 minutes worth of content, and it's good. It's really very well explained. The examples, the shoulder ability that the author speaks about in one of the first and the second videos, where he just drives home the point, and it starts typically from a point where what is the classical theory, why is the item response theory different, and gets slightly mathematical at times, but I think that's acceptable. It's a very well done kind of a video. I would recommend that you go and have a look at these 6 videos, 60 minutes, and I think it will definitely add a lot of value to what you're doing, where you are. Great, awesome. So there's a lot of things that are coming on the item response theory from my side. We're going to do a broad literature review of where item response theory is at play, in use at this point in time in the industry. We're going to do some sort of a mathematical deep dive where I'm going to try and help you connect something that you learned in 6th standard and build it from there, from your 6th grade to where you are. We're going to do like a working session over here. Let's see how that thing goes. Machine learning and IRT, you'll come across things like DIRT, DIRT, and there are some interesting, fascinating applications that are being built, some interesting work that is being done in this particular space. And finally, I think we're going to have a working session where we're going to really talk about, okay, I've understood what IRT is, but how do you really apply it? I think, can we move from item response theory to item response application, so to speak? And that's like a very bad analogy, but I think, how do you apply what you learn? So that's probably the thing. I probably see like a couple of sessions just coming on this, so I'll keep you guys definitely posted on this. Before that, I just want to quickly jump onto this. So this is the website, which is sscnascom.com. So NASCOM has these things called as qualification packs, and what a qualification pack essentially is, that for a particular role, what is it, what skills should a person have, and they have objectively made a list of that particular thing. So let's just quickly have a look at what a qualification pack typically looks like. And the reason why it is important is that if you are able to pinpoint that for a person who is in this particular sector, this particular subsector, what are the skills that we are looking at, and if we can objectively put them out. So awesome. It's a fairly evolved kind of a document, but it kind of comes to this KA1, KA2, KA3. You need to know, you should be able to do this, and performance criteria and all those kinds of things. So maybe I'll just quickly take you through another document, which is the Edison project. Where Edison project is, I think these guys in the year 2015, they started about formalizing the data science profession and building out what should be the skills required to get into this particular profession. I don't really have any comment on with respect to what they wanted to achieve or what they did end up achieving. I have no first-hand information on that. But what I would really like to point out is that they have put together some really interesting documents, and one of them is the DSBoK, that is the Book of Knowledge for Data Sciences. And in this particular book, on one of the pages, is this particular thing, a detailed definition of the DSBoK and suggested knowledge units. I just want to pinpoint your attention to a specific place, that there are knowledge area groups, there are knowledge areas within the knowledge area groups, there are knowledge units, and within the knowledge units there might be even more subsections. So what I really want to bring your attention to is the 3-level hierarchy: knowledge area group, knowledge area, and knowledge unit. The way they have broken down a subject, the taxonomy that they have tried to establish, the hierarchy that they have tried to establish, the way they are documenting that this is what the body of knowledge under this particular subject is something that I want you to take over here. And this is at the heart of what is a measurement framework. Any measurement framework is going to need some sort of a, how are you going to count what you want to count. So this is something that is a very well thought through kind of a, at least it's a good start, very, very, very strong start. And I think you should just go to this particular site, edisonproject.eu, and discover more about what they have to offer. There are multiple such books with respect to competency framework, with respect to the Book of Knowledge, and you will find some value at least skimming through some of these documents. Awesome. So these are the things I just wanted to quickly pinpoint to you in the context of the item response theory. I'm just coming back. Why item response theory and why some of these things? The simple reason being that item response theory, built on top, used in conjunction with intelligently, with a very strong measurement framework, with a very well-defined measurement framework, let me not say strong or weak, but very well-defined measurement framework, might be your iterative path to build something meaningful with respect to a strong, meaningful, valuable product, a valuable experience for your learner. Awesome guys, so that's pretty much it what we wanted to offer you with respect to what is this item response theory. One of the simplest introductions. We just wanted this to be an introduction to item response theory, and I look forward to hearing from you. I'll be posting some of these videos on my blogs, and there's a series 2, there is a part 2 and the part 3 of this particular blog that's coming up. Thank you so much. Stay tuned to Humans of EdTech, and I'll be sharing my thoughts on the world of EdTech and what's happening, what's cutting edge, and what to expect in time to come. Thank you so much, and bye.